88 is the number to call. And, of course, if you live in the East Metro, you know full well the biggest race of the year this year is the race for the United States House of Representatives seat currently held by Betty McCollum. And the Republican attempting to take it out to Betty McCollum this time around is my next guest, Tony Hernandez. Welcome back to the broadcast, Tony.
Thank you, Mitch Berg. It's always a pleasure to be on with you.
It's always great to have you here because doing whatever it takes to take a shot out of Betty McCollum always feels good. And I say that not to be mean. I say it because I am sick of being, quote, represented, end quote, by someone whose priorities extend essentially to what has been her big accomplishment so far in the Congress. Oh, yeah, getting the Army to pull its ads from NASCAR and Ultimate Fighting. I'm proud to be an American, Tony Hernandez. I don't know about you.
Well, the NASCAR issue, just like so many other issues coming out of Washington, D.C., are nothing more than a distraction from the awful economy that so many people are suffering from right here in the 4th Congressional District. And
you're out there in the 4th Congressional District. You see what you've been going door to door. You've been talking to people, and what are you hearing about life in the 4th Congressional District? I mean, are people getting the fact that they are not better off than they were 4 years ago, Tony Hernandez?
No, most people are starting to get that, and they also realize that they're definitely not better off than when Congresswoman Betty McCollum was sworn in 2001.
Wow.
Just think about everything that has changed since 2001, the 12 years that Betty McCollum has been in office. Back then, the unemployment rate was 4.5%.
Yep.
The national debt was under $6 trillion.
Yep.
People had jobs. People were making money. Times were good. Now, fast forward 12 years later to where we are now, you talk to people in our district, there's a lot of people still unemployed. There's people that are backwards on the real estate. They owe more than what it's actually worth. And the price of the common goods that every family needs, gasoline, heat, is going up. So we have major problems that need solutions.
This is the statistic I love, or should I say hate, to throw out there to people, but it indicates where this country's gone since Betty McCollum has been in office. At the depth of the post 9/11 recession, the worst it got after the 9/11 recession in the summer of 2001, the employment rate, the percentage of the workforce that was actually working was 63%. Today it's 58.7. We're 5 points worse now in terms of absolute employment of the workforce than we were in the worst days of George W. Bush's administration. So people are not better off than they were 4 years ago. Certainly not better off than they were when Betty McCollum came to office. Absolutely, Tony Hernandez.
There's no doubt about that. And in my theory, one of the reasons why the economy is so bad right now is because the government is too big.
Yep.
The balance between the federal government sector and the private sector is off kilter right now. And if we don't have a Congress that is serious about getting our fiscal house in order, we're not going to see a real recovery in the private sector.
Absolutely, it can't happen. Now we'll talk a little more policy in a little bit here, but the political season is really just kind of kicking off in earnest right now, Tony Hernandez. We've had you on the broadcast a number of times, including 2 years ago when you ran for state senate, I believe, down in the Merriam Park area, as I recall, one of the old districts, where you had one of the more credible performances of any of the state legislative candidates back then, as I observed at the time. You actually got a district under a 20-point margin, as I recall, or one precinct, which is a very good thing in the heart of St. Paul. But for the audience that hasn't met you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, I was born and raised in St. Paul, so I've called St. Paul my home for a long, long time now. My large Irish, Mexican-American family has their roots here. I'm the oldest of 7 brothers and sisters. I have 64 first cousins, and I'm proud to say that I come from a second-generation American immigrant family. And so really the foundation of the Hernandez family is family values, hard work, entrepreneurialism, and really advancing and aiming for the American dream.
And by the way, if you go out to the website, Hernandez USA, we have a few family pictures circulating through the carousel on the front of the page, and it looks like school photos, not family pictures. It's a huge family, Tony Hernandez. By the way, I have to, in the interest of full disclosure, I got to say I'm a volunteer for the Hernandez campaign, just in the interest of full disclosure. I'm a worker bee, so it's not like there's any great conflict of interest interviewing you on the air here, but just in case people are wondering about these things. Anyway, you seem like a relatively normal, well-adjusted person, Tony Hernandez, and that begs the question, how on earth do you decide to run for United States Congress in the 4th Congressional District?
Well, it really came as an epiphany, and I had my political passions ignited voted in 2008, and it was during the time of the fall of 2008 when financial Armageddon hit. Remember, there was a 1,000-point drop in the stock market.
Boy, do
the doom and gloomers on TV were saying that the world was ending, that America would be no more, and it was right around that time that the bank bailouts and the corporate bailouts were proposed, and Congresswoman Betty McCollum, she voted for the bank bailouts, and it was at that time that I wrote a letter to her and expressed my disgruntlement and disappointment with the idea of too big to fail, and I realized that the time was now for me to stand up so that we could take our country back and restore the great principles of this country: freedom, capitalism, and immigration.
Now, the question that the cynic might ask you, Tony Hernandez, is the 4th CD traditionally is a district that's full of people who either work for government or depend on government, and preaching limited government to people who are government, a lot of government employees, union members especially, is a long walk off a short political dock. How do you answer the cynics, Tony Hernandez?
Well, I mean, there's certain people that you're just not absolutely going to win over ever, and you just have to get over that in politics. You're not going to please everybody. But really, when I'm talking to people in St. Paul and the surrounding areas, in Roseville and Shoreview, I ask a simple question. I ask, do you think the government is too big, or do you believe that we need government to grow bigger and spend more money?
Right.
And most people agree that the federal government has grown too big, and so we need to look at ways to responsibly reduce spending, reduce the scope of government, and also to give some of the roles and responsibilities back to local governments, like the state and city and county governments.
Now, we want to talk more specific policy after the break here, Tony Hernandez, but let's just do a quick rundown on how things will change if you, Tony Hernandez, wind up going to Washington this fall. What's different? What's going to be the big difference between you and Betty McCollum? The cynics will also say there's no difference between the two parties. That's become less and less prominent lately, but how do things change if you're in Washington?
Well, I think the difference is, if God willing I am elected, job number one is to work on fiscal issues. It's been over 1,100 days since the federal government has passed a budget into law. This is highly irresponsible, and it's one of the reasons why so many small businessmen and women are losing faith in our American political system. So if Tony Hernandez is elected into the U.S. Congress, job number one is to work on a budget that's balanced and that reduces spending, not just the trajectory of spending, but reduces the actual dollar-for-dollar line item budget.
Very briefly, Tony Hernandez, before we hit the break here, if you go to Washington, again, God willing, as you say, and we'll certainly be hoping for a tailwind here, who do you see yourself lining up with? Is there someone sitting in Congress right now that you particularly admire and would seek to model yourself, at least to some extent, after?
There's a lot of members of Congress I could see myself wanting to build relationships with, to work towards solutions for our problems. The people that come to mind is Congressman Chip Kravac, our own from here in Minnesota, Representative Paul Ryan from Wisconsin, but people who really have a renewed vision for this country that's not new in scope, but really going back to the traditional principles that make this country great.
Okay. So, yeah, it's but you've been spending some time around the fair here, haven't you?
Yeah, we were here yesterday. We were at the White Bear Avenue parade that was Wednesday evening, and it was incredible to see all the families and the people on the streets, and you really get an idea about our district and just how rich it is in different cultures, and there's every different type of American you could possibly imagine in St. Paul and the surrounding areas of Congressional District 4. And that's really one area where our campaign is trying to focus on, is the new voter. People often ask, well, how are you going to win Congressional District 4? You know, you have to win the minds and the hearts of the people, but we also have to, as conservatives, engage the new voters in the Latino communities, the Hmong American communities, the Sudanese.
That's music to my ears, because that's one of those things I've been yapping at the 4th District and at the state party about for literally as long as I've been a pundit of any kind. There are so many people out there who vote Democrat, they vote DFL so far, but they're conservatives and they don't know it yet. And the Latinos, the Eritreans, the Sudanese, the Asian business people that are getting starved out of their businesses on University Avenue right now, they are conservatives. They just don't know it yet. Are you finding that as you go navigate the 4th Congressional District, Tony Hernandez?
There is no doubt about that. And the other thing that I'm realizing as I'm talking to more and more people in our district is just how far the Democratic Party has become in the fringes and the extreme. I mean, they're focused in on social issues issues of abortion and same-sex marriage.
War on women.
The war on women, the extreme environmental issues that are trumpeted daily. And this is really out of touch from mainstream St. Paul, because the people here are concerned about jobs, the economy, and their financial security.
That was one bit of huge news today. The Operating Engineers Union, the 49ers up in the Iron Range endorsed Chip Kravac for the 8th Congressional District, which is huge. I don't know if people know how huge this news is. Private sector unions starting to break away from the DFL in any way, shape, or form is huge news. Again, we've seen a lot of the new Americans who occasionally in an unguarded moment will say, these DFLers really don't represent me the way I am. How do Republicans reach these people, Tony Hernandez?
Well, we reach them with having a heart of compassion. That's one area where we really have to focus in on, because tone matters. What we say and how we say it absolutely matters, and I think that we are losing the message battle that way. The other thing is we need to inspire a whole new generation of people that are running for office, people from different ethnic backgrounds and from different classes and whatnot, and we really need to celebrate the diversity of that aspect. Because if you go to a Democratic primary, you'll see a member of the Hmong community, a member of the Sudanese community, all these various people that are running for office, and they bring with them their community and their followership. And let me tell you, they're not liberal or they're not socialist leaning. Really, they want common sense answers to jobs and the economy and fiscal solutions.
Yeah, they do, and reaching out to them is going to be a huge, it's the only way forward for Republicans in Minnesota, to say nothing of the 4th District, and music to my ears to hear that a campaign is actually taking this seriously. That being said, the 4th District is not the same as it used to be. Redistricting gave you probably one of the bigger breaks that a Republican has had in Minnesota in recent years, other than Eric Paulson, obviously, who basically his only choice is he's going to win by 2 digits or 3 in this next election here. It has changed things up for you here, having all these eastern suburban districts full of people who fled the DFL being brought into the 4th District here. How's that changed the campaign for you, Tony?
Well, we're really excited about the new additions to the 4th District. We brought in a lot of the old part of the 6th District, so Woodbury is now part of our district. Stillwater, Grant, Lake Elmo, many areas that are leaning conservative and also bring a new energy and a new dynamic to the district. So, and then we also have the issues, because I don't know if Betty McCollum knew that Stillwater was going to be part of her new district, but she was ardently opposed to the building of the Stillwater Bridge, which members of her own party were even of support of. All of Stillwater wanted this bridge to be built because it makes sense, it makes economic sense, and it's also jobs. And Betty showed her true colors there. She's beholden to the big labor union bosses, to the environmental union, and also the lobbyists as well. So.
And by the way, when I say labor unions, we're talking the government employee unions. The private sector unions, like the 49ers and a lot of the private sector unions, they would love to have some of those jobs that are out there. We're talking some of the people who side with AFSCME, like the teachers union, and who side with the environmentalists who are trying to gun deck the bridge. So.
Yeah, and even going one step further than that, like, we don't want to offend the rank and file union members that are on the ground working, trying to have security for their family. But really, we need to put our targets on where the real culprits are, and that's the big labor union bosses. Those guys they have too much power at this point. They need to be checked and they need to be balanced, because their influence on Minnesota politics is not favorable for our economy.
Yeah, absolutely not. By the way, music to my ears, I heard that the vote among the 49ers, or whether to endorse Kravac or not, wasn't even close. It was actually kind of a blowout, and so that's a sign that the rank and file private sector unions are starting to get the message here, and that is going to be a huge shift. That is starting to make some outreach and inroads among the minority new American communities. That's where the future of the GOP lies in this state here. So we're talking with Tony Hernandez, GOP endorsed candidate for the 4th Congressional District. Tony, let's